I listened to the stories of Godolphin Arabian and Darley Arabian, and I dreamed one day that I would own a great racehorse, and I hoped through that racehorse I would make my family and my country proud. Those are the words of the man who rules Dubai, and I'll come back to him more in just a second. But to set the stage for today, my friend Tom recently sent me down a rabbit hole of horse racing. He's been curious about one day potentially investing in it, and let's be real, there's not that much information out about it. But what I ended up finding was quite astonishing, and something today that I'm calling the bloodline portfolio. On the surface, it's all about horses, but really it's about one idea that's been living rent-free in my head ever since. And I think it's one of the most single important ideas for anyone building in sports over the next 100 years. Maybe anything for that matter. And that idea is permanent capital. Here's what I've come to believe. Permanent capital is the master key. Get it right, and you don't just win horse racing, you win every single asset class adjacent to it. The real estate, the brands, the venues, the franchises, all of it. But get it wrong, and it doesn't matter how smart you are, how well-timed your entry is, or how well connected you are, you will be forced to sell your best asset at the worst possible moment every single time. And let's be honest, for most of us, that is complete catastrophe. That all said, you can't understand permanent capital in the abstract. You have to see what it looks like when somebody runs it for 300 years. So I want to take you on the same journey I went on, and it has 4 stops. First, a bedtime story in the desert that explains why this asset class got so mispriced to begin with. Second, a 300-year-old genetic vault and an Italian breeder who will show you what the asset actually is. Third, the dark version, what happens to the greatest racehorse of the 20th century when the capital isn't permanent. And finally, I want to leave the racetrack entirely because Jerry Jones and the biggest funds in America are proving the same math right now. One idea, the whole way through it. Let's get started. Getting back to the quote I began this video with, the man who rules Dubai, Sheikh Mohammed, has a memoir, and in it, he tells you exactly where his life's operating clock started. And I guess this makes sense. Many people in our wildest dreams begin in our childhood, but he grew up listening to this bedtime story about the Godolphin Arabian and the Darley Arabian, and he dreamed that one day he would own a great racehorse. The Godolphin and Darley are both horses. Hopefully you get that by now. But sit with this for just a second. The horses in his bedtime stories died almost 300 years ago, and the man who runs Dubai is telling you in his own words that the origin point of his life's ambition was a story about a horse that died a century before the American Revolution. That same operating clock is what became known as the Godolphin. 3,000 horses, $2 billion deployed, and it is now the largest thoroughbred operation in human history. But here's the point of this story. Assets don't get mispriced because people are silly or dumb. They get mispriced because people hold the wrong clock in their hand. They are simply playing the wrong game. American institutional money has looked at horse racing through a 10-year fund math for 40 years. Raise the fund, deploy it, exit by year 10. That's what most of us get pitched, and that's the majority of what happens. But on that same clock, this sport would be uninvestable because bloodlines take 30 years to compound. The land takes 50 itself, and heck, the Derby brand took 150 years to get to where it is today, which is why American capital has walked straight past this asset class for more than 4 decades. Not because the asset was broken, but because it couldn't fit into the spreadsheet with a J-curve, meaning that the asset was never really broken, but the clock was. That's the frame, and hold on to it because every stop from here is proof of that one line. So if the clock was the problem, what's the asset? That's our second stop, and it comes down to 2 rules of thoroughbred racing that change everything about how you should look at this world. Rule number 1, every thoroughbred racehorse on earth descends from 3 stallions. 3, every Derby winner, every Triple Crown horse, every $500,000 yearling that's never even run a race, all of them trace back to 3 horses brought to England about 300 years ago. One was captured in battle, one bought in a Syrian market, and another one found, according to legend, pulling a water cart through the streets of Paris. That third horse became the Godolphin Arabian, the same racehorse from the bedtime story just a few minutes ago. Rule number 2. In 1791, an Englishman published something called the General Stud Book. It listed every thoroughbred bloodline in existence, and it had one rule to it. The registry is closed. To race a thoroughbred, your sire and dam both have to be registered thoroughbreds, a sire and dam just being a male and female horse. And both of their heirs too. All the way back for 230 years, not one drop of outside blood has entered this system. And in America, they take it even further. The registry bans artificial insemination. Every registered foal has to be conceived by what the industry calls live cover, which means a stallion is physically capped at about 200 foals a year, no matter how valuable he is. Let me translate all this into normal everyday talk you and I could understand. This is intellectual property with a legally enforced, biologically enforced supply cap. There's no version of just print more, no strategic round to 10x production, no AI-generated infinite copies. The rules of the sport prevent it, and the biology of the animals prevent it as well. This might be the most legitimately scarce IP class on Earth, and it's been sitting in plain sight since 1791. Now every tech founder in America is trying to synthetically build what the stud book has had since before the United States government existed. It's already built, already closed, already the law. Which means permanent capital in this asset class is being deployed against something that literally cannot be diluted. And that might be the rarest combination in modern finance, if I do say so myself. And here's why the product inside the closed registry is so good. And this is by far my favorite part of this entire story. It comes from a man named Federico Tessio, an Italian breeder who ran a small farm on the shores of Lake Maggiore and spent 50 years asking one question: why is the thoroughbred fast? His answer: the thoroughbred exists because its selection has depended not on experts, not on technicians, not on zoologists, but on a piece of wood, the winning post of the Epsom Derby. A piece of wood, no committees, no consultants, no KPIs, not a single boardroom. A piece of wood at the end of a horse race. First past that post, and that's it. I really like this because growing up, when I was playing baseball, I'd often be in the batting cage hitting, and because of the new TrackMan technology in these batting cages, you can see if you hit a home run or not. And of course, I would put many out of the park, but I would always have this one friend of mine that would say to me, Dom, you just have to do it in a game. So let's make sure we understand what's being told to us here. The thoroughbred is the output of the only ungameable benchmark in all of sports. You cannot lobby a finish. You cannot lobby a home run. You cannot politically pressure a stopwatch either. For 250 years, without interruption, one benchmark applied to a closed gene pool every single generation. It might be the longest continuously running R&D program in the world, older than most companies, older than most countries. When you buy a top yearling today, you are not buying a horse. You are buying the current state of a 250-year optimization loop. Now here's the part that gets me every time. Tessio died in 1954. A few months later, just a few months, a colt he had bred named Ribbit ran his first race. Ribbit retired unbeaten, 16 starts, 16 wins. People still argue that he was the greatest racehorse Europe ever produced. Tessio spent 50 years building toward that horse, and he never saw him run. Now, of course, everything I've presented to you so far is for your own opinion, but I do believe what I'm about to share is the most important part of this entire story and narrative. If you are an operator in sports, real estate, luxury goods, in any category where compounding takes decades, and you cannot accept the possibility that you may not live to see your best work pay off, you are structurally in the wrong game. That's not a mindset issue per se, that's a capital structure issue. Because the second you need the payoff in your own lifetime, you start making short-term decisions that break the compounding. And as Charlie Munger told us for years, that is his cardinal sin. The whole point of permanent capital is to remove the operator's fear of dying before the harvest. That's a tough pill to swallow for most of us, I can imagine. But that's the asset at its best. Now the third stop on this journey. And here we're going to examine what happens without permanent capital. The story turns dark for a second, I'll just warn you, but I want you to really feel this. January 1973, the founder of the Great Virginia Stable dies. His estate taxes are enormous, and his daughter Penny does the math and realizes she may have to sell the stable's brilliant young colt just to pay the government. That colt was Secretariat. The greatest racehorse of the 20th century almost got sold to pay estate taxes before he even won the Derby, before he even won the Belmont by 31 lengths, before he was Secretariat. So what did Penny do? She invented modern syndication. 32 breeding shares and $190,000 apiece, syndicated in February before he ever raced as a 3-year-old. She was forced to financialize the future to survive the present. Think about that phrase again. Forced to financialize the future to survive the present. That is the exact phrase for what happens to every American family holding a compounding sport asset without permanent capital protection. Let me make this very clear. Estate taxes hit on a settlement clock, but bloodlines run on a generational one. When those two clocks collide, a family is forced to sell. And the IRS doesn't care about your operating cycle, the IRS cares about April 15th. And think about what that means beyond horse racing. NFL franchises passing between generations, English football clubs, family-owned racetracks, the private course your grandfather bought in 1962 that your parents can't afford to hold on to. I'm not speaking from experience. Every generational transfer in sports without permanent capital is a forced sale waiting to happen. That's why Godolphin was built the way it was. Family controlled, sovereign adjacent, no fun life, and no LP calling in 8 years asking about distributions. And it wasn't because they were greedy. They designed the structure so Penny's story could never happen to them. That's the actual case for permanent capital. It's not tax optimization. It's protection of the compounding. Now, if you're not a horse person and you're still with me, thank you. And this fourth stop is why any of this matters outside of racing, because Jerry Jones proved the same math in football. And I want to thank my good friends Matt and Brent for putting this on my radar. February 1989, Jerry Jones buys the Dallas Cowboys for $140 million. The team is reportedly losing $1 million a month, and the press treats him like a fool who wandered into a cathedral. Today, the franchise is worth $13 billion. And here's the number I want you to sit with. The Cowboys received the same national media distributions as the Cincinnati Bengals, the same league, same TV deal, same check, roughly $450 million each year. So why are the Bengals worth $5.5 billion and the Cowboys are worth 13 plus? And for any fan of the NFL who's watched over the last few years, you'll know that that gap isn't football. That gap is 35 years of not selling. I'll say that one more time, nice and slow. 35 years of not selling. The Frisco real estate, the catering business doing $120 million a year, the Netflix cheerleader series, the stadium naming rights, all of it built on top of a base Jerry Jones refused to liquidate, no matter how many offers came in, no matter how many private equity firms lined up in the 90s. The only irreplaceable ingredient was time on the same balance sheet. Now translate that back to where we started. The Kentucky Derby is 5 times older than the Cowboys. 150 years of Millionaires Row, hats, generational identity. And the platform build, the storytelling engine, the merch stack, the streaming layer is basically non-existent. The last time Hollywood seriously touched the sport was Seabiscuit in 2003. There is a $7.5 billion Cowboys equivalent gap sitting inside the Kentucky Derby brand today. And this is the pattern of every under-monetized legacy asset in sports right now. Regional food brands, family-owned baseball clubs, boutique hotel groups, historic golf courses, private member clubs, music festivals, wineries. If it has 50 plus years of brand equity trapped inside of a short clock operator, there's a Cowboy-style repricing waiting for the person willing to hold it long enough. Which brings us to why I'm making this video now. Because for the first time, the money itself has changed shape. 10-year closed funds have never fit this asset. And that's not an opinion, it's their arithmetic. You cannot compound a bloodline inside of a vehicle that has to liquidate before the bloodline matures. But look at what's being built in the last couple of years. Permanent capital dedicated to sports at Apollo, CVC's Global Sports Group, 6th Street running a 30-year fund, nearly unheard of in the mainstream firm world, and a $9 billion vehicle at Thrive Eternal, explicitly designed to hold assets AI cannot disrupt. And I'd argue a living, breathing racehorse conceived under a mandatory live rule is about as AI-proof as it gets. The patron saint of this style of capital never bought a racehorse in his life. Warren Buffett wrote in his 1988 letter to shareholders, "Our favorite holding period is forever." For 40 years, everyone treated that line like a coffee mug slogan, but it's not. It's the operating manual for compounding scarcity. So let me land it with 3 things you can take with you. 1, if you're an operator and you don't have permanent capital, possibly think about getting access to it. Partner with it, joint venture with it. Bring it into your cap table on generational terms, because the second you're forced to sell your best asset to pay a tax bill, an LP call, or a fun life clock, the compounding breaks and it doesn't come back. 2, if you're chasing a fast exit, you're playing the wrong game. Or at least, I'll be honest, it's not a game that I'm personally interested in. And if you know that it's a game that you're interested in, go ahead. But I'll remind you that the biggest wealth in modern sports, the Cowboys, Godolphin, Manchester United, Liberty's F1, was created by people who refused to sell, not by people who timed the top. People who refused to ever be the seller. Those are the heroes of today. Finally, number 3, permanent capital only works when it's paired with real operators. Godolphin didn't win because Sheikh Mohammed had money. Lots of people had money. It won because that money was paired with the breeders and trainers who actually know the animal, by feel and not by spreadsheet. Money is abundant right now. So if you can be the operator that permanent capital wants to underwrite, and you too share that infinite time horizon, you have the career of a lifetime ahead of you. If you're allocating permanent capital, your entire job is to find those people. And I guess as a bonus extra, I'll leave you with this final 4th item. I just simply want you to hear what Buffett had to say one last time in 1988. Our favorite holding period is forever. If you enjoyed this video essay today, please make sure to like and subscribe and share it with a friend who could benefit. We'll see you next time.